Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This again is the humble voice of Olusegun Opeyemi Odunton. Today, I made a decision to stop church attendance in the back to be able to create a time to discharge this much more important and holier duty, a civic duty to my nation and generation. In the eyes of God, in the estimation of God, civic duty to community is service to humanity. And this is much more important, it's much more holier, and it's much more sacred than church attendance. When you look keenly and critically at the religious and spiritual essence of the lives of all of the prophets of God, starting from the most senior, the Orunmila of the Yorubas, Jesus of the Israelites, prophets Muhammad, who is their baby brother, and all other messengers of God, you will quickly discover, without a scintilla of doubts, that the core, that the spiritual and religious essence of their lives was not just love of humanity, but also, most importantly, service to humanity. More so, the singular, most uncontested consensus that cuts across all religions is loving your neighbor as yourself. Civic duty to nation, civic duty to generation is born out of love, not only for the neighbors you know, but for the millions of humans, the millions of people you will never be able to meet in your lifetime. Even if by some divine intervention, your lifetime were doubled, tripled, quadrupled by some divine grace, you will still not be able to meet all of the people your service to humanity is capable of touching their lives. An example of this that is close to home is the late Chief Obafemi Awolowo's free education program that touched the lives of millions of people, most of whom are still alive as we speak, while Awolowo is long gone and never met 0.0001% of them. So it is clear as daylight, and there is no need to litigate the clarity of this fact. The fact that love and service to humanity is much more important and holier in the eyes of God than church attendance. So, moving forward, let me say that the most important element in nature, the most constant element in nature is change. A revolutionary change birthed either by natural strength or by a cesarean section. By whichever means it comes, the cries of change must be heard loud and clear in our time. However, the youth of every society, who are the mothers and midwives of change, must beware of morality. Morality is a murderous fiend, relentlessly seeking to cause a miscarriage in the birth of change, in the midwives, in the mothers of change. Morality is always seeking to stifle with its fatal grip the cries of change. However, like a passionate mother, we have a generational duty. We have a sacred responsibility to protect our baby, to protect change from the jealousy, from the fatal clause of morality. Just as the natural instincts of a mother dictates, we cannot afford to be afraid to die so that our baby, so that change may live. My metaphorical rigmarole is not intended to be bombastic, nor to confuse you, but it is necessary to help screw and drive an armor into your consciousness, our dire situation and the urgency for action. Since the Youth Corps member Raye broke the heights of silence on the suffering of millions of Nigerians who are living under the weight of excruciating suffering, abject poverty, and the constant fear for safety of lives and property, a revolutionary hysteria has gripped our nation. Under the hashtag 30-day rants, thousands of young Nigerians, thousands of teenagers, and thousands of Gen Zs are speaking up about the issues affecting Nigerians, most especially economic issues. We must be proud of these young people. However, we who have some experience in the trenches over the years fighting against injustice, most especially against a much older oppressor, we must warn the newbies. We must warn our comrades, brothers, and sisters about morality, the trump card of the enemies of change. As you all know, the youth of every nation is the demography, is the group, is the revolutionary elements most desirous of change. Throughout our youthfulness, we carry change in our hearts, in our wombs. Biologically speaking, that unique ability to desire change, that unique ability to conceive the pregnancy of change, let alone to birth change, fades with age, except in a few Sarahs and Elizabeths, whose revolutionary fertility is ageless. It is only from these rare and few specimens of nature, such as Yele Showore and Dele Parotimi, that the youth must entertain progressive guidance. Otherwise, in the hands of conservative old people, the seniors, morality is the immoral and evil justification. Morality is the immoral pincers used by the aged, the old, to abort change. History is replete with evidence that every change that has ever been born in any society only flows from the uteruses and loins of the youth. And the old guard, armed with the shenanigans of morality, are always lurking in broad daylight, looking to cause the miscarriage of change. I say this because in my many interactions, observations of sociological trends, and social discourse in our society, I have identified a very sharp difference, a very sharp difference between the youth and the old. In the youth abound a boundless hope for change. However, in the old abound a resignation to fate and faith, because they have been battered by life, bitter and embittered by life. They cling to the surreal idea of life after death, a fantasy that has been sold to them wholesale by the dubious merchants of religion. Fascinated by this fantasy, they are manipulated into the surrendering the political and spiritual dominion that has been handed to us by God to a few men who constitute a kleptocratic, who constitute a religious and political oligarchy. So we will be guilty as them. We will be guilty of the same betrayal of divine trust if our generation surrender our divine political, economic, and spiritual dominion to these corrupt and self-appointed oligarchy. We have a mission to wrestle this divine dominion from our class enemies. So we must take it back, and we must do it now. So in our generational duty to wrestle dominion from this evil oligarchy, they will attack our age. They will belittle us. They will downplay our experience. They will try desperately to sow the weeds of doubt in our minds. But as a last resort, they will seek to divide and conquer us by throwing the crumbs of special assistancy at us. But all these devices, all these schemes must be, must be made to fall flat on their faces. We are not too young to lead the charge to change the ugly and tragic trajectory of our nation. We are not too young to take charge, not to be on the same stage, to be on the same pedestal with the old wise ones. And if you remember, the prayers of every wise parent and elders have always been that we be wiser, that we be more successful than they are or than they were. So a nation that hinders and hold down its youth risk a natural regression instead of progression. Our parents and elders, they strived to give us a very sound education, an education mostly and generally better than theirs, an education that is a license and a blank check for breaking glass ceilings and barriers. Unfortunately, whenever we try to cash that whenever we try to cash out this check, they obstruct us with all manner of fallacies that they themselves are probably ignorant of or definitely unconscious of. And chief among them is the age fallacy. So, by virtue of advanced age, they become infected with the fallacy of omniscience. They think age confers on them. They know it all authority. And this is a dangerous enemy of scientific, political progress, and logic. So these traditional political and religious oligarchy has turned our democracy inside out to the point that we are effectively practicing a gerontocracy, which is rubber stamped every 4 years by rigged elections, a monetized, militarized, and minoritized system that leaves no room for the young, for the people, most especially the youth. So the young must first and foremost stand up to this number one enemy of change: morality, age, age fallacy, and gerontocracy. Or else, our rant will be nothing else but infantile noise, a bleat, a bark, a meow, and a crow. So we should not allow ourselves to be held back, and we shall not be held down by the evil trio of morality, age, privilege, and all sorts of cultural fetters. And you shall not bow to none of these. And let it be said that it shall not be reason versus morality. It shall not be reason versus age. It shall not be reason versus some preposterous culture. But at all times, it shall be a competition between reason, logic, and common sense. So, ladies and gentlemen, and how Gen Zs, we are not too young to pick up the baton and begin our generational race for change. So rather than the next generation picking up the baton from the ground, we will be handing it over to them with pride and honor. May this revolution happen in our lifetime. Aluta continua Victoria Asata.